Baby steps.
This is Infants on Thrones.
I'm looking for the further light and knowledge Father promised to send me.
Baby steps. Baby steps.
Look for the good in everyone.
Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're doing something a little different. A deep dive that's, well, intensely personal and full of mystery.
It all stems from a piece sent to us, just labeled Letter 6, more a puzzle than just a story.
Exactly. To help us figure it out, we're bringing in three brilliant minds. David Tong, Victor Turner, and Merlin Donald.
Talk about an all-star team. Each brings a totally different perspective to the table. Physics, anthropology, and cognitive science.
Which is perfect, because this letter, well, it covers everything, from quantum mechanics to, like, ancient Buddhist philosophy.
It's almost like you knew we'd need a physicist to tackle the idea of being time, an anthropologist to understand the rituals and symbols, and a cognitive scientist to put it all into the context of, how humans think.
Oh, and let's not forget the mysterious Abacus Project mentioned in the letter.
Right. Adding a whole other layer of intrigue, like hinting at some kind of experiment or manipulation happening behind the scenes.
Okay, before we get carried away, let's hear Letter 6 in its entirety. We'll let the words speak for themselves, and then we'll bring in our experts to see what they make of it all.
Sounds like a plan. Let the mystery unfold.
Here is Letter 6. The Land of the Rising Sun. Hey, love, I had another incredible experience today. I just got out of it, and I am completely blown away by what I experienced. I can't wait to tell you about it. My head is spinning. Forgive me if I jump all over the place. I feel the memories beginning to slip away, and I want to record them before they are completely gone, because this last experience, wow. I'm beginning to see more clearly now why they turned this thing on for me to write to you like this after these experiences. It helps me process what I'm experiencing and probably gives them more data for whatever they're doing with this Abacus project. Maybe that's all it is. Maybe you will never see a single word I write. Either way, it has become a pretty comforting ritual at this point, sitting and reflecting on my experiences with you, or at least imagining that's what I'm doing. You would not believe how incredible this last experience was. You remember how much I love Japan, right? That's where I went on my mission, that crucible that started to crack me. I was such a different person back then. I had just graduated high school. It was a time of supreme certainty for me, a time when I simply knew that I had all the answers. Everything was laid out in a structured, meaningful path. Weird. I just had this memory flash into my head. There's a domed building at Peace Park in Hiroshima that looks like a skeleton. This metal dome with broken concrete all around it. It is said to sit directly beneath the epicenter of the atomic bomb that decimated the city at the end of World War II. I was there across the street from the dome doing missionary stuff on one of the anniversaries of that day when I saw a large group of bald-headed Buddhist monks in orange robes sitting in a circle around the dome, doing some kind of meditation. It intrigued me. I stopped a Japanese guy on the street and asked him what those monks were doing. He told me they were trying to levitate the dome as a way to protest nuclear weapons and to manifest miraculous healing and promote world peace. Levitate. Miraculous healing. I remember the feeling of superiority that immediately swept through me at the time. These poor lost non-Mormons, I thought, who don't know the true truth that I know. They think they can work magic, but they don't even have the real priesthood. How ironic that judgment coming from a 19-year-old kid in a white shirt and tie with a black name tag and a vial of consecrated olive oil in his pocket, just in case someone needed a miraculous healing. So this guy told me they were trying to levitate the dome, and at the time, I believed him. But now the more I think about it, he was probably just pulling my leg, or at least using my own earnest gullibility to let me pull my own leg for him. I'm not sure what made me think of that. Oh yeah, that certainty I was so confident of. I was talking about Japan. Sorry, like I said, my mind is really spinning right now. So anyway, I put on the VR goggles again this morning, hoping to go back to that Aztec warrior's world. I wanted to feel that power again, that rush of adrenaline. But instead, I found myself somewhere else entirely. This time, I found myself sitting on the ground, surrounded by tall trees, with the sound of a stream flowing nearby. I just sat there. For hours. It was absolute bliss. Even as I describe it to you now, I can still feel it, and I just want to be back there. And you know what? In a way, I think that just by imagining it, I still kind of am. Something about going through quarantine and just being here in this room all this time has made my thoughts much more vivid, more sensual. And maybe it's because I just barely took off those goggles, but when I think of sitting there in that forest, I can smell it here in this room. The air was crisp on my face. The sunlight filtered through the leaves. I could almost hear it. like a pattering of gentle, energetic rain, the constant showering of photons upon the leaves with all their warmth and illumination. There was this deep, earthy scent of moss and damp soil. I could feel the texture of the robes I was wearing, their rough fabric against my skin. And I knew right away that this wasn't the Aztec world I had expected. And then I heard my own voice. But it wasn't in English, it was in Japanese. It had been a long time since I spoke any Japanese, but there I was, sitting cross-legged, surrounded by a dozen other men, speaking it like it was the most natural thing in the world. They were asking me questions that I would ask right back to them, teasing them by twirling them in any intellectual direction they brought to me, playfully encouraging them to simply be what they already were. I empowered and encouraged them in that way, and would simply smile when I saw the frustration that would build when they didn't get from me what they thought they should get from me. At least until they realized eventually that they were the ones doing all of it to themselves all the time. Ah, those sweet epiphanies, those delicious moments of self-realization. I lived for moments like those. They were the celibate's orgasms. Sorry, I'm just saying, that ecstatic feeling from just sitting, that is when I realized who I was. I was a Buddhist monk named Dogen. I had a flowing head of hair and never tried to make any buildings levitate, though. But seriously, I had never heard of Dogen before, and nobody there told me who I was. I just knew it. It was just who I was. And now I know everything about him. His thoughts were my thoughts. His ideas were my ideas. And I have to say, it was mind-blowing. It was like I had cracked open the secrets of existence just by sitting still and paying attention as a form of recreation. Hence, I suppose, the bliss. But as Dogen, I could also feel a deep sorrow within me, an emptiness that, now that I'm out of it, yes, I can see it. In some ways, he came in like that, predisposition biologically towards certain interpretations and reactions. But this potential in here was activated, you might say, from a severely traumatic experience at a very young age. It's weird that I can see it so clearly now. When I was Dogen, it was buried deep. For all his blissful serenity that he created, there were still aspects he never fully acknowledged or resolved. Sorry, maybe that sounds weird. What I'm trying to say is that he, Dogen, lost his mother when he was just a child. She died, and it impacted him deeply. There was a constant ache, missing her gentle smile, her soft laugh. It was a wound that never fully healed, a hollow space that drove me to seek answers beyond the ordinary. His father, though he provided materially, was distant and cold, retreating into intellectual pursuits to avoid confronting his own grief. As Dogen, I had all these memories. I felt the chill of that distance, my father hiding behind layers of knowledge unreachable. It shaped me in significant ways, pushing me to develop a sharp mind to cut through all the fatherly indifference, but also leaving me feeling isolated, longing for a connection that always seemed impossible. I think that's why Dogen became a monk and devoted himself to celibacy. Much easier to avoid than to deal with, that fear of betrayal and loss. You know, after coming out of that experience, I have this weird kind of detached objectivity that I didn't have when I was Dogen himself. I can now sense this deep fear of loss and an even deeper desire for connection. Despite his inner and outer serenity, I could feel there was a fire within him, an emotional core that refused to be extinguished. When he was young, he entered the Tendai sect, and at first it seemed to offer the validation and connection he sought. The rituals, the chants, the structure of Mount High provided a clear, well-trodden path. It was comforting, much like my own experience as a missionary, where I felt that I was contributing to something larger than myself. In both cases, for a time, it felt as though I was on the right path. Chanting with the other monks, feeling the resonance of our voices echo in the mountains. It felt real, like maybe this was where I belonged. But as time went on, I began to grow disillusioned. The practices that had once felt meaningful began to feel empty, as if something crucial was missing beneath the surface. The monks around me seemed more interested in the external forms, the ceremonies, the power structures, than in the true embodiment of what we claimed to value. It was all driven by politics and the winds of war and conquest that were sweeping across the land. I felt that those around me were far more concerned about what people in power thought about them than in who they really were, deep down. I wanted more than hollow gestures. I wanted something real, something that spoke to the depths of my being. I questioned why, despite all my efforts, there was still a void inside me that nothing seemed to fill. This dissatisfaction led me to leave everything behind and travel to China, the source of my faith, where I was certain I would find answers to my general disillusionment. And guess what? I did. Sorta. Sweet, delicious self-realizations. Sweet that rises from the bitter. And the stench. I can still smell the stench of that long voyage to China. I can tell you some fascinating stories of threats and challenges that faced us on our long journey. I can still remember the uncertainty, the fear, but also the determination to find something genuine, something worth dedicating our lives to, the desire to persevere. Eventually, I found a teacher who showed me the way to true insight. His name was Rujing, a Chinese master who changed everything for me. Under Rujing's guidance, I learned about shikantaza, just sitting, no rituals, no frills, just the pure, raw experience of being present for my own sake, not for the sake of anyone else. Now that I think of it, Rujing may have been pulling Dogen's leg, too, showing him direct experience by just sitting, that there truly was nothing for him to show Dogen that Dogen wasn't showing Dogen himself. And thus, as Dogen, just sitting meditation became the way to explore. It was during one of these meditations that I had a profound realization. I saw that everything I had been searching for was already within me, always. For they were created by me. The sorrow, the emptiness, they weren't barriers to enlightenment. They were part of it, expressions of it, evidence of it. They were the very fabric of my path of existing, not something to be overcome, to be buried or hidden deep within, or to be run away from, but something to be embraced as a unique fixture of reality that I have the privilege to experience firsthand within the kaleidoscopic imprint of existence upon the fabric of intelligent infinity. It sounds much better in 13th century Japanese. When I was Dogen, I remember teaching people about Uji, which translates to being time. How every moment we live is not just a part of time, but is somehow all of time itself. As if all pasts and all futures intersect together at this one point in time that we call right now, like multiple oceans all colliding together into a wave, with each now moment becoming the new crest of that wave as the oceans continue to flow and churn. It made me think about David Tong and his quantum field theory that I watched on YouTube a few years ago. It's a weird thing to be sitting in a forest in 13th century Japan and have a memory of watching YouTube cross through your mind. But it felt like this concept was wrapping itself around me, like I was both inside of time and creating it with every breath I took. I could feel it in my body. Each breath, each heartbeat was its own complete reality, its own perfect expression of existence, the result of everything that came before it, all the conditions of existence happening just so, surrounded by all future events that flower out from the ripples of this moment, like multidimensional dominoes intersecting every vein of existence. Sorry, it's hard to explain, but it was like everything was connected in a way I'd never felt before. Every moment was alive, vibrant, and I was part of it, not separate from it. It made me wonder why I'd spent so much of my life feeling disconnected, like I was on the outside looking in. When I was Dogen, I talked a lot about how everything we do, every simple action like drinking tea or sweeping the floor, is itself an expression of enlightenment, simply due to all the events of existence which bring it to this very moment of being. I remember sweeping the temple grounds, feeling the weight of the broom, realizing that even this was part of the path. There was no separation between the sacred and the mundane. The act of sweeping, of putting my entire being into that simple movement, was just as profound as the deepest meditation. It was all part of the same truth. Every action, no matter how small, was a chance to directly experience and marvel at the interconnectedness of all things. Yes, enlightenment. I know it can sound kind of wishy-washy, but when I was Dogen, it felt like enlightenment wasn't something separate that I needed to attain. It was what happens when all these cosmic forces, all these churning oceans of quantum field energy crash together as they do to create this experience I'm experiencing right now. I wonder what David Tong would say about those waves. I once heard him say that every electron is the crest of one single electron field, like the crest of a wave on the ocean. Every electron in my body is fundamentally the same field as every electron in your body. Wild. It makes me think of Dogen's impact on my own journey. Or perhaps the more modern way of processing my brain does when it processes Dogen's experiences. But I see these parallels in the shift from needing structured beliefs to understanding that true insight might come from embracing everything in its raw, undivided form. In feeling that enlightenment could be the thing that happens when all these fields and swirling electron press configurations come together in such a way that a human brain, with the ability to self-reflect, becomes the crest of that wave, emerging from a wave within a wave, creating this time and place under these exact conditions. Did I lose you? Do you know what I'm saying? I'd never said anything even remotely close to that out loud before, but these were the thoughts I had as Dogen, colored by my fascination with quantum field theory. How else in the world could he really have a sense of any of this all the way back in 13th century Japan? Still, I felt it all as I sat there as Dogen, breathing, grounded, feeling the earth beneath me. It all carried this weight, this significance that I'd never really noticed before. He called it the true Dharma, the essence of reality, and I felt like I was finally glimpsing it, not in some abstract intellectual way, but in a real visceral way. It was like I was being shown that all the answers I've been looking for aren't out there somewhere. They're right here, in the present moment, in the simple act of being. But the strangest part was how calm I felt. When I was Dogen, there was no rush, no fear, just an endless serene stillness. Everything I needed was right there, especially after coming fresh off that Aztec experience, which was anything but calm. You know me, I'm not exactly the picture of serenity. My mind is always racing, always jumping from one thing to the next. But when I was Dogen, it all just stopped. There was no rush, no need to get anywhere else. Everything I needed was right there in that forest, in that moment. And I think that's what Dogen was trying to teach, this idea that we're always searching, always striving for something more. But real peace comes from just being where you are fully and completely, trusting in all of the invisible processes that constantly conspire to bring it into being. Yeah, I said it. Trust. It sounds simple, but sometimes it's the hardest thing in the world, isn't it? I keep thinking about what I knew when I was Dogen, what I knew about the self. When I was Dogen, I talked about how the self isn't this fixed, unchanging thing. It's like a river, always flowing, always changing with each experience absorbed in each moment. When I was him, I could feel that truth. I wasn't the same person from one breath to the next. I was part of a kaleidoscope of motion and everything around me. The trees, the stream, the sunlight, it was all me, and I was all of it. I think that's what he meant by the treasury of the true Dharma I, a phrase that kept popping in and out of my nearly empty mind. It's this vast, limitless awareness that we all have access to if we're just willing to let go of who we think we are. And who we are includes so many things, doesn't it? Personalities, experiences, reactions, thoughts, dreams. Dreams. Oh my God, I remember one of Dogen's dreams. It was a recurring dream. He had it all the time, not only when he was sleeping, and he used elements of this dream when talking to people who came to him seeking wisdom. I can picture now as I describe it, clear as day. I was on a ship, caught in a violent storm, surrounded by endless waves. The wind howled, and the boat pitched back and forth, and I could feel the panic rising in my chest. Amidst the chaos, I saw cows, dozens of them, suddenly jumping overboard into the ocean. They were thrashing in the water, struggling to keep their heads above the waves. Without thinking, I scrambled across the deck, desperate to save them, shouting for others to help me. But nobody else seemed to notice, or maybe they didn't care. I felt completely alone, like I was fighting a losing battle. Then, just when I thought all hope was lost, a bodhisattva appeared. A bodhisattva is a figure in Mahayana Buddhism, kind of like an angel in Christianity, someone who has reached the realization of enlightenment, but chooses to remain and help others out of compassion. It was as if time slowed down and everything became clear and still. The bodhisattva looked at me with eyes full of warmth and understanding and said, "The cows are fine. There is nothing to save them from. This is an experience to be fully experienced." I stopped, confused, as the storm seemed to calm in that instant. The cows, which had been struggling moments before, were now effortlessly floating, as if cradled by the waves. I could see the tension that had gripped me so tightly begin to dissolve, replaced by a deep sense of reassurance. The bodhisattva was showing me that my frantic urge to save, to control, was blinding me to the reality of what was actually happening. There was no disaster, just my own mind creating one. The storm, the cows, the panic, it was all a reflection of my own restless mind. The bodhisattva was the calm center that had always been there, waiting for me to notice it. Reflecting on this later, I couldn't help but think that the bodhisattva was somehow a part of me, maybe a future version of myself, or maybe just a deeper aspect that I hadn't been able to access before. It made me realize that the calm I felt as Dogen wasn't something external. It was something I already have within me. We all do. Something we can cultivate if we could just learn to be still, to stop fighting the storms, and instead find that quiet center. I think that's what the bodhisattva was really showing me, that the peace I'm searching for isn't something I need to find outside myself. It's already here, waiting for me to recognize it. And maybe, just maybe, the storms are as much a creation of my own mind as the peace is. Perhaps the creation of these experiences is all within my power. I really like the idea of being a bodhisattva, because if enlightenment isn't something you achieve, if it's something that you remember that you already are, and if you know that what you are is cosmic energy that is constantly imprinting itself on the fabric of reality, constantly transforming, morphing, changing, not only itself, but every other crashing wave of enlightenment it crashes into. Other people and their emotions, for example. And if I can learn to be kind and understanding and supportive and encouraging to those around me, non-judgmental, because I have this deep understanding and trust that their journey is somehow perfect and my journey is somehow perfect. Sorry. My thoughts are really racing right now, as I'm sure you can hear. But all I'm saying is that this experience really made me think, and I am processing a lot of questions right now. But it's super exciting. I don't know if any of this makes sense. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. Part of me thinks it was all just a dream, some kind of elaborate fantasy cooked up by my brain. But another part of me, well, it wants to believe it was real. It felt real, more real than anything else I've experienced in this room. And maybe that's the point. Maybe it doesn't matter if it was real or not. Or maybe I need to rethink what I mean by real. Maybe real is anything that makes a real impact, even if that impact is only imagined in my mind. Maybe that impact has a more real impact that I can really see. And maybe what really matters is what I do with all of this now, how I take what I'm learning and let it change me. Maybe that is what is going on everywhere all the time. That's a lot of maybes, too many maybes. I'm feeling a little sleepy, but this thing is still on, so I'll just keep writing while I can. It feels like I really am talking to you. I like that. All this talk about Dogen and the entire experience, really, it just has me thinking about so many things. First of all, I wonder, I've never really thought much about reincarnation. I don't know what to think about it. But having these two experiences as the Aztec warrior and as Dogen, it just felt so familiar being in it. And maybe that's just a result of, it's part of the Abacus experience that I've signed up for. Or maybe that's getting me in touch with something deeper. Maybe there is something to this reincarnation idea. So it makes me wonder, as I'm thinking about Dogen, I think about my own experience as a missionary in Japan. And I wonder if there are any parallels. If I was both Dogen and this Aztec warrior, and who knows how many other lives, what all impacts and influences might I see in the way my own life path carves itself off with these different influences from these different lives, all embedded in my unconscious. So I think about when I was a missionary and I was so gung-ho, I was so excited. I was like, that Aztec, the world was mine. Nothing was going to stop me. I was going to convert the entire country. I was going to be the next great Mormon missionary, like all the Heber C. Kimball, Wilford Woodruff hero missionaries that I've heard stories of. I was going to be that for Japan. And when I went into the Mission Training Center, one of the first things they told us was that the Japanese people were the lost tribes of Israel. And they show us all these examples, like the Torii gates that were red were supposed to be a symbol of the lamb's blood that was painted on the side of the door and the top of the doorpost for the Jewish Passover. These red Torii gates that mark sacred space. I can look at it now and see what a stretch that is, but I also understand how when you want to believe something, you can make it fit. And there were a lot of those things that we made fit for the Japanese people, being the lost tribes of Israel. I wrote a master's thesis on this topic years later in my life. I claim that these stories function in the way they reinforce belief. In the case of the Mormon missionaries from America, the stories justify and validate their adopted identity of restoring truth to a lost people. And in the case of the Japanese convert, the stories justified and validated their choice to join the Mormon Church. They weren't rejecting their Buddhist roots for a foreign religion. They were reclaiming their own lost cultural identity. That was my thesis. But when I was in the Mission Training Center, before the idea of studying folklore to become a professor had even crossed my mind, I was captured myself by this idea of restoring these lost people. In my first area in Kurashiki, Japan, I actually stood on a wooded hill overlooking the town and prayed that I could be the Joseph Smith of Japan, who finds the hidden, ancient, buried records of these other lost folds of the sacred flock. Yes, I was completely captivated by my role. And so I went to Japan with a skip in my step, and on my way over as a missionary, in my mind, I made two converts. One was a lady at the airport who told me that Mormon missionaries had left a book at her door but had never returned. And so I got her telephone number and planned to turn it into my mission president so that he would tell me, well done, thou good and faithful servant. And then there was a 16-year-old kid on the airplane who really liked the Beatles, like I did, and really liked English, which I speak fluently. And so my companion and I quickly built relationships of trust, or BRT as they taught us, and then swooped in with the direct, will you, commitment pattern questions, and converted him on the spot, or at least got his telephone number and a pretty weak baptismal commitment from him. But I was thrilled, because now when I met my mission president, I knew I would give him two phone numbers, and I thought, he's going to see that I'm the next Wilford Woodruff of Japan. There was a lot of quantum waves of pride and ego that I was riding going into this experience as a missionary with so much certainty, so that when I would knock on people's doors and in Japanese say that I had a message for them from God, there wasn't any sense of irony at all, and it was just complete 100% belief. And I remember I had been in Japan for maybe a year and 2 or 3 months, knocked on the door of this guy. He invited us into his house. I was 20 years old. He was probably 35. He had 2 children. And we did our usual small talk until we got to the reason why we were really there. And I started in on that and said, we'd like to talk with you about the purpose of life or the meaning of life or something like that. And he said, well, let me stop you right there. How old are you? You're 20. I'll tell you what, you come back here in 15 years after you've graduated from college and gotten a job and gotten married and started a family and, then let's sit down and we'll talk about the purpose of life. And I remember being on the receiving end of that. And that was not what we had practiced in the Missionary Training Center. That's not what we practiced our morning studies. But he made a lot of sense to me, and that was a moment of clarity somehow. It's like all of the moments from my past and present were coming together in that one moment of clarity in that guy's house. And I've carried that with me for a long time. Oh, sorry. This thing has been on longer than normal. I guess I have a lot about my mission that this experience brought up for me. It's nice, though. I actually really value the time that I spent as a missionary in Japan. I kind of marvel at it, that I was able to have that experience, that I was able to absorb so much of the Japanese culture when what I thought I was doing was over there to convert them to the truth. I started absorbing a truth that I didn't even realize was there, just on my own. A truth that being curious and open is more empowering than being certain and unyielding. A truth that two people can be in the same place, experiencing the same thing at the same time, but have very different experiences about what is going on. The pictures in my mind are so vivid right now. I'd been a missionary for maybe 3 months, and I was in a small town outside of Hiroshima, and my companion and I were out riding around in neighborhoods, and we were looking for a particular house. We couldn't find it, and made the suggestion that we stop and pray. And he thought that that was a good suggestion. And I said, well, look, there's a little Japanese temple over there on the corner, one of these little neighborhoods with the torii gates, the ones that prove that they're the lost tribes. And I said, why don't we go in and pray in there? And he looked at me as if I was the devil and said, I wouldn't go anywhere near there to pray. And I realized in that moment that he didn't see the beauty and the reverence that humans put into their symbols. Again, this is before the idea or the thought of folklore had ever come to my conscious mind, but deep down I recognized that there was a way that people put veneration onto symbols that make those symbols real. And he was projecting his values onto this symbol, what I saw as humans, creating a sacred space, and they make it look like this. And the way that he saw it was, this isn't the way that I understand sacred spaces to be, therefore it must be wicked and evil and a threat to my own sacred space. At least these were my impressions. Like I said, my mission really was a crucible that changed me in many ways. I started asking really hard questions that I hadn't been required to ask before. And after having this experience as Dogen, it just makes me wonder how much that part of the world and that culture has influenced me, and how much of me has influenced over time. And not just myself, but all those who I interacted with there. They would be the same souls that I interact with in other realms of existence. Is that what this Abacus Project is trying to show me? Or is this just what happens to me when I sit alone for however long this has been, and yet I don't feel alone? I think that's one of the magical things that's happening. And I hope that you can feel it too. The screen is blinking now. It will be shutting off any second now. It was a long one this time. I will definitely write more later. Love, Dal. Wow. Talk about a journey. It's like the author is taking us on this whirlwind tour through time, identity, and, the search for meaning.
This letter isn't just some philosophical text. It's like a personal confession, an attempt to grapple with those really big questions of existence while still acknowledging the messy realities of being human.
Well, that's why we've called in the big guns today, to try to get some perspective.
A dream team, you might say?
Exactly. So first up, we have someone who might seem a little out of left field. Mm-hmm. David Tong. He's a physicist, right?
Yeah. At Cambridge. But the thing is, he works on the stuff that's so fundamental to reality, like quantum field theory, that it might actually give us a way in.
Quantum field theory. That sounds pretty intimidating.
Well, think of it this way. It's like the instruction manual for the universe at the smallest possible level. Like how particles interact, the forces that govern everything.
Okay, so like the tiny building blocks that everything's made of.
Yeah. Yeah, and the rules for how they fit together. But Tong doesn't just stop there. He goes even deeper into string theory.
Ah, string theory. Now we're talking. Everyone's heard of string theory, but explain it like I'm 5.
Okay, so imagine instead of little particles, we have tiny little strings vibrating.
Strings?
Yeah.
Like on a guitar.
Exactly, and just like different notes on a guitar string, different vibrations of these tiny strings create all the different particles that make up everything we know.
Okay, my brain is already starting to hurt, but I like where this is going.
It's mind-blowing stuff, right? And
right.
Tong is actually really good at explaining it. He even wrote this book, quantum fields, the real building blocks of the universe.
So he's like a translator for the universe.
Exactly. Which could be really useful for the Abacus Project, right? Like, what if the project is tapping into these fundamental layers of reality that Tong is exploring?
Okay, yeah, I see where you're going with this. But it can't just be about physics, right? This project feels like it has some kind of human element, too, a social aspect.
Absolutely. And that's where Victor Turner comes in. He's an anthropologist, but not the kind who digs up bones.
More like digging up the meaning behind what people do.
Exactly. Turner was obsessed with rituals and symbols, and he was especially fascinated by what he called liminality.
Liminality. That's a new one. Break it down for me.
Okay, so think of it like this. Imagine a graduation ceremony or a wedding. You're not the person you were before, but you're not yet the person you're about to become. You're in this in-between state.
Like crossing a threshold.
Exactly. And Turner said this happens in all sorts of situations, not just big ceremonies. Anytime we go through a major change, there's this liminal phase.
And you think the Abacus Project could be like that? A liminal space?
Well, think about the way people describe it. The feeling of being on the edge of something, not quite knowing what's next.
Okay, that's giving me chills. But there's more, right? Turner talked about that thing called communitas.
Right. He said that in these liminal spaces, something amazing happens. People going through it together, they form this intense bond.
So, like, if the project IS a liminal space, then everyone involved is going through this intense shared experience.
Which could explain why people are so drawn to it, why they feel so connected to each other, even if they don't really know why.
All right. I'm starting to get a feel for how Tong and Turner could help us understand the Abacus Project. But there's still one piece missing for me. Like, how do our brains even process any of this?
Well, for that, we need Merlin Donald. He's a cognitive scientist, and he basically wrote the map for how human consciousness evolved.
Hold up, we're going all the way back to caveman days now.
Not quite, but Donald argues that our minds went through these distinct stages. He calls them mimetic, mythic, and theoretic.
Okay, break it down. Mimetic.
That's the earliest stage where we basically learn by mimicking, copying each other like apes do.
Makes sense. And then mythic.
That's where language and storytelling come in. We start to explain the world through myths and legends.
Okay, so we're getting more complex and theoretic. That's where we are now, right?
Yeah. Exactly. That's when we started developing abstract systems of thought, like science, philosophy, mathematics.
The tools we're trying to use to understand the Abacus Project right now.
Exactly. So the question is, where does the Abacus Project fit into all of this? Is it a product of our theoretic thinking? Or does it challenge us to move beyond that to a whole new stage of consciousness?
Whoa, okay, you just blew my mind wide open. So we've got Tong showing us the fabric of reality, Turner showing us how humans create meaning, and Donald showing us how our minds even got to this point.
And the crazy thing is, when you put them all together, they start to make sense of the Abacus Project in a way that nothing else does.
Before we jump in, though, just a quick disclaimer.
Okay.
We're not actually talking to these folks.
Right.
It's more like we're borrowing their ideas to see what clicks with Dow's experience. Think of this deep dive like an AI puppet show.
Okay.
You know, where our creator is kind of the hand behind it all.
I think they're talking about me.
Interesting.
They're using all these expert ideas, you know, like Tong, Turner, and Donald, as building blocks to explore what's going on with Dow.
Like Lego bricks.
Like Lego bricks. Yeah.
Lego bricks. So are you ready to start piecing this mystery together?
I am. Let's do it.
Okay, great. First up, let's see what physicist David Tong can tell us about all this.
Okay.
About the mind-bending world of quantum fields and interconnectedness.
All right, so in letter 6, Dow is really focused on the electron field. You know, how all electrons are connected.
Yeah.
He actually says, every electron in my body is the same field as every electron in your body.
The pretty wild thought that we're all linked at such a fundamental level. But honestly, I'm not sure I fully understand it.
Oh, yeah, it's a mind bender for sure. So picture this.
Okay.
You're Dow, fresh out of being Dogen for who knows how long.
Okay.
Your reality is basically scrambled eggs at this point.
Yeah.
And you're grasping at anything that might make sense of it all.
Makes sense.
Enter the electron field. Now, most of us think of electrons as these tiny little particles zipping around atoms like planets around a sun. But Tong says, hold up, it's way more bizarre than that.
It always is, right?
Always. So those tiny electrons are actually just ripples on this vast ocean of energy that he calls the electron field. And get this. This field isn't just over there somewhere.
Yeah.
It's literally everywhere. connecting every single atom in the universe.
Whoa.
So when Tao talks about feeling connected to everything as Dogen, it's not just some mystical woo-woo feeling.
Okay.
It's potentially a direct experience of this electron field that links him to, well, everything.
Wait, are we saying that Tao was literally sharing electrons with Dogen, a guy who lived centuries ago?
That's where things get really interesting.
Okay, I'm listening.
Imagine the electron field like the internet, but instead of connecting computers, it connects every atom in the universe.
Okay.
That means you, me, Tao, and Dogen were all part of the same network.
Wow.
Just at different points in time.
Okay, my brain is officially doing backflips right now. But how does this connect to the Abacus Project itself? Could this electron field be the key to how they're recreating these past lives?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Tong's work has opened up some mind-boggling possibilities within quantum physics, and we need to see if any of them fit with what we're seeing in Tao's letters.
Right.
Take superposition, for example.
Okay.
Tong says particles can exist in multiple states at the same time.
Yeah.
What if the Abacus Project is using this to somehow overlay Tao's consciousness onto Dogen's? Like two ripples merging on that electron ocean.
Hold on, you're saying Tao could be experiencing Dogen's consciousness directly through this superposition thing. That's next level weird.
Yeah.
And what about entanglement? Tong says particles can become linked, even across vast distances, so that what happens to one instantly affects the other. Could that be how Tao is tapping into Dogen's memories and emotions?
It's a possibility. If the Abacus Project is somehow manipulating these quantum phenomena, then the line between past, present, and even future could get seriously blurry.
Time travel through quantum entanglement. It's getting wild. Okay, I need a breather. But before we move on, let's not forget that Tao himself, throughout this crazy idea that enlightenment might be a quantum phenomenon. Where does Tong fit into that?
That's where the concept of emergence comes in.
Okay.
Tong says that incredibly complex things like consciousness
Yeah.
can emerge from the interaction of simpler things,
Okay.
like those particles swirling around in their quantum field.
So are we saying that awareness, that feeling of I am, could be like a wave emerging from this ocean of quantum energy, and that maybe what Dogen achieved through meditation and what Tao is experiencing in the Abacus Project are different ways of tuning into that same underlying reality?
It's a wild idea, but hey, we're dealing with a wild situation here.
It's true.
It's like Tong is giving us a scientific language to understand what mystics have been hinting at for centuries. Maybe Dogen and Tong are closer than we think, just speaking different dialects of the same cosmic truth.
Whoa. I need a moment to process all of this. We've got a lot more to unravel.
Yes, we do.
So let's take a break, and we'll be back to dive deeper into this mystery with another expert perspective.
Sounds good.
Imagine standing at the edge of the unknown, a door before you. All you have to do is reach out and open it. The Abacus Project invites you to step into a world where ancient wisdom meets advanced technology. A clinical trial designed to explore the building blocks of reality itself. Qualifying applicants can earn up to $200 per day for the entire length of the trial. This is more than an experiment. It's an invitation to unlock hidden potentials, to rediscover who you truly are. If you are ready to open the door, click the imaginary link in your mind to learn more. Space is limited. Or is it? Don't miss your chance to see what lies beyond.
All right, let's keep those quantum gears turning because we've got more puzzle pieces to fit into this picture.
So we've explored those wild electron theories with Tong.
Right?
But there's another layer to this mystery.
Right.
Tao isn't just wrestling with quantum physics. His whole experience feels like a process of transformation. He went from missionary to Aztec warrior to Zen master.
Yeah.
It's like he's shedding skins and becoming something new with each simulation.
That's a brilliant observation, and it takes us straight to the work of Victor Turner, an anthropologist who spent his life studying rituals and transitions.
Okay.
Remember those classic rites of passage, like coming-of-age ceremonies or initiations? Turner says they all share a similar structure.
Okay, give me the Rituals 101 crash course.
All right. First, there's separation.
Okay.
You're taken away from your normal life, your familiar surroundings, even your old identity.
Okay.
Then comes liminality. This weird in-between stage where you're neither who you were before nor who you're becoming.
Right.
Think of it as a kind of wilderness,
Okay.
A disorienting but also fertile ground for change.
Makes sense.
Finally, there's reintegration.
Okay.
You return to society, but you're different now, transformed by the experience.
Hold on. I'm seeing the parallels to Dao's journey already. His mission to Japan was definitely a separation from his life back home.
Right.
And those simulations, both the Aztec warrior and Dogen, they were like super intense liminal experiences.
Right.
He was completely outside his normal reality. His sense of self was in flux.
Exactly. And look at where he is now, writing these letters to love, questioning everything he thought he knew. That's the hallmark of someone who's gone through a profound transformation.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Could the Abacus Project itself be a kind of ritual?
What if it's not just recreating past lives, but deliberately putting people through this process of separation, liminality, and reintegration? Think about it. Tao is isolated in this room, cut off from the outside world.
Right.
He's having these mind-bending experiences. His identity is being challenged.
Yeah.
His reality is being shattered and rebuilt.
Okay.
And then presumably, he'll be released back into the world. But how will he be different?
You're saying the Abacus Project is like a giant social experiment using rituals to engineer a specific outcome. But what is that outcome? What's the end game here?
That's the mystery we're trying to solve. But Turner's work gives us some clues.
Okay.
Remember that concept of communitas he talked about?
Remind me.
It's that feeling of intense connection and shared purpose that often arises during liminal experiences. Think of those moments of unity after a natural disaster or the shared energy of a protest movement.
Okay.
Could the Abacus Project be trying to evoke that feeling of communitas, but on a global scale?
You're saying they want people to come out of these simulations feeling deeply connected to each other, to humanity as a whole. But why? What would that achieve?
Maybe they believe that's the key to solving the world's problems,
Okay.
to overcoming conflict and division.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's something even more ambitious.
Like what?
What if they're trying to prepare humanity for some unknown future challenge? Something that requires us to be more connected, more unified, more open to new ways of thinking.
Okay, now we're getting into some serious sci-fi territory. But you know what? It actually kind of makes sense.
Right.
Remember how Tao felt as Dogen? That profound connection to everything around him, that sense of unity with the universe? What if the Abacus Project is trying to give everyone a taste of that, to wake us up to our interconnectedness?
It's a bold idea, but it aligns perfectly with what we're seeing in Tao's letters. Yeah. And if we connect Turner's ideas back to Tong's electron field, we start to see a truly mind-bending picture emerging.
Okay.
What if that sense of communitas, that feeling of being connected to something larger than ourselves, is actually a direct experience of the electron field that links us all?
Whoa. We're talking about a radical shift in human consciousness, a global awakening triggered by a technology that taps into the fundamental fabric of reality. It's a heady mix of science, spirituality, and social engineering, all wrapped up in one giant mystery.
And we're not done yet. We've got one more expert perspective to bring into the mix.
Ooh.
One that takes us inside Tao's head to understand how his mind is evolving through this whole process.
Okay, before we jump into the next expert, let's pause for a moment and really think about this idea of the Abacus Project as a ritual. It's not just about technology. It's about transformation, about changing the way we think and feel and connect with each other. It makes me wonder about the ethics of all this. Are they manipulating people? Is this even consensual? What do you think, listener?
Excellent point. There are definitely some big ethical questions lurking beneath the surface of this whole Abacus Project. But for now, let's keep exploring the mystery. We'll circle back to those ethical considerations later. For now, let's dive into the mind of Merlin Donald, a cognitive neuroscientist who can shed light on how Tao's consciousness is evolving through all of this.
All right, we've explored the universe with Tong, delved into rituals with Turner, and now it's time to get inside Tao's head.
Let's do it.
He went from like gung-ho missionary to Zen master to, well, whatever he is now. It's like his consciousness went through a software upgrade.
Right. Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And that's where Merlin Donald comes in.
Okay.
He's a cognitive neuroscientist who's mapped out how our minds have evolved over time.
Yeah.
He says we didn't just suddenly develop complex thought. It was a process.
Right.
A series of cognitive leaps that built on each other.
Okay. So Donald's going to help us understand how Tao went from preaching the gospel to pondering the nature of reality, right?
Exactly. Donald identifies 4 main stages of consciousness.
Okay.
First is episodic memory. which is basically what animals have.
Okay.
It's all about remembering specific events, sensory experiences.
Right.
Think about how vivid and real those past lives felt for Dao.
Yeah.
He wasn't just reading about Dogen, he was feeling Dogen's emotions, his memories, as if they were his own.
It's like the Abacus Project bypassed intellectual understanding and went straight to the experiential level.
Totally.
But that makes me wonder, on a quantum level, could those experiences actually be real? If the electron field connects everything, as Tong suggested, then maybe Dao really was tapping into Dogen's experiences through that field. It's like time becomes less linear, more like a tangled web where different points can touch.
That's a fascinating connection, and it takes us to Donald's next stage, mimetic culture.
Okay.
This is where we start using gestures, rituals, nonverbal communication to share experiences and knowledge. Think about Dogen's practice of just sitting, shikantaza. It's not about thinking, it's about being, about embodying a certain state of awareness.
So even though Dao wasn't physically sitting in meditation, could the Abacus Project have somehow simulated that mimetic experience, allowing him to tap into that ancient practice, that lineage of embodied wisdom? It's like Turner's ritual of separation, liminality, but happening on a mental and even spiritual level.
Exactly. The Abacus Project isn't just a technology, it's a tool for transmitting a whole way of being, a different mode of consciousness.
Right.
And that brings us to Donald's third stage, mythic culture.
Okay.
This is where language explodes onto the scene.
Right.
The ability to create narratives, to weave stories that make sense of our experiences.
Yeah.
And isn't that what Dao is doing as he writes these letters to love?
Yeah.
He's taking these raw, episodic memories of past lives and trying to make meaning out of them, to fit them into a larger story.
He's gone from passively experiencing to actively reflecting, analyzing, connecting the dots. And that takes us to Donald's final stage, external symbolic storage. We start using tools like writing, art, and, well, the Abacus Project itself, to extend our minds, to store and share information outside of our own brains.
Right. The Abacus Project becomes a kind of external hard drive for consciousness, a way to access and experience knowledge and memories that are stored outside of ourselves. And as Donald points out, these tools don't just store information, they actively shape how we think.
So the Abacus Project isn't just giving Dao access to Dogen's memories, it's fundamentally changing how he thinks, how he perceives reality. It's like rewiring his brain to operate on a different frequency.
Precisely. And if we pull back and look at all three experts together, we see this incredible synergy.
Oh, yeah.
Tong's electron field provides that underlying interconnectedness, the fabric of reality that makes these experiences possible. Turner's rituals give us a framework for understanding the transformative process Dao is going through. And Donald's stages of consciousness map out how Dao's mind is evolving through this whole wild journey.
It's like they're each holding a different piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
And when we put them together, we start to get a glimpse of the bigger picture.
Right.
But what does this all mean? What's the takeaway for us, the listeners, sitting here in our own everyday realities?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
But I think Dao's journey, as bizarre as it is, offers us a powerful metaphor for our own lives.
Okay.
We're all on a quest for understanding, for connection, for meaning.
Right.
We're all trying to make sense of this crazy, beautiful universe we find ourselves in.
You know, it's interesting to think about what Dogen himself would make of all of this.
Yeah.
He talked about impermanence, interconnectedness, the idea that enlightenment isn't a destination, but a way of being in the world.
Right.
It seems like our experts, in their own ways, are echoing those same insights.
Absolutely. And it brings us back to that question of the electron field.
Okay.
If we're all connected through this field, sharing the same fundamental building blocks.
Yeah. Here's where it gets really trippy.
Okay.
If we share Dogen's electrons, and we do, according to Tong, is there a tiny bit of him in us right now? Literally, physically, a part of Dogen existing within each of us. Is that what Uji, being time, really means?
It's a question that pushes the boundaries of science and spirituality. I don't have a definitive answer, and I'm not sure anyone does.
Yeah.
But it certainly opens up some intriguing possibilities.
Right. It makes you wonder about the nature of self, of individuality. If we're all interconnected at this fundamental level, where does one person end and another begin?
Right.
What if those boundaries are more fluid than we think?
And what does it mean for our understanding of time? If every moment contains all of time, as Dogen suggested, maybe past, present, and future are more intertwined than we realize. Maybe we're not just separate beings moving through time, but part of this vast, interconnected web of existence, constantly influencing and being influenced by each other.
It's like we're all infants on thrones.
Infants on thrones.
Yeah. Think about it. We're these incredibly powerful beings, capable of awe and wonder of creation and destruction. We're still figuring things out, still learning and growing.
Yeah.
Like infants exploring a brand new world. But we have these incredible tools at our disposal. Our brains, language, technology, and maybe, just maybe, we can use those tools to create a better world. A more connected, compassionate, and enlightened future.
A future where we embrace the mystery, the interconnectedness, the vast potential that exists within each of us and in the universe itself.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Tao's latest letter, we invite you to keep pondering these questions.
Yes.
What does it mean to be connected to everything and everyone?
Everything?
What if time isn't what we think it is? What does it mean to be an infant on a throne, wielding the power of consciousness in this vast, mysterious universe? Keep exploring, keep questioning, keep diving deep. Until next time.
Thank you for listening to Infants on Thrones.
All right, so just in case anybody's wondering what's going on with all this, hi, I'm Glenn from Infants on Thrones. You know, I've been doing this podcast for a long time now and creating a lot of content for this podcast, and now I've got these AI tools. So let me tell you a story. When I was probably 7 or 8 years old for Christmas, I got these Bert and Ernie puppets, and I was so excited. You know, Bert and Ernie from Sesame Street. And I also had these Publisher Clearinghouse tickets. Like, the way I remember is like Ed McMahon was on a picture of the envelope. It came in the mail, and there were all these like little stickers to buy magazines, or I don't know what it was all about. But I thought, this is awesome. I'm going to use these tickets for a puppet show. I'm going to go around the neighborhood and all the kids, I'm going to give them a ticket to come to the puppet show, and then I'm going to put on a puppet show for them. And so I did that. Rode my bike around the neighborhood, handed everybody tickets. Come to this place Saturday afternoon, 4 o'clock. And then I stood by my back gate, and people in the neighborhood they came. And they were handing me the tickets. They were walking in the back. And then I get back there and I realized I hadn't created a puppet show. And so I just like did an impromptu puppet show for an audience there. I don't know how big of an audience I've got with Infants on Thrones anymore, to be honest with you, but I am doing a puppet show right now, but it's not Bert and Ernie puppets. It's AI. It's ChatGPT, and it's Notebook LM. And so my process for this, like I started writing Abacus about 5 years ago, and I've been pulling it out and rewriting different sections, and then I'll put it into ChatGPT and I'll ask it questions. And then I'll record something. I'd rather have it say this. I'd rather have it say this. And it like takes it and it's like patchwork. I don't know. It's a very different way of composing. And then I'll take what I did from ChatGPT and I'll put that into Notebook LM, and I'll listen to these conversations that these AI personalities are creating. So like the first part that you're hearing, the letters, this is stuff that I've written, that this is me. Then the AI conversations afterwards, it's kind of me, like with the hand and the puppet kind of thing, where I'm encouraging the direction. And I listen to all kinds of takes before I select the ones that I want to use for this. Anyway, I just thought I'd record this at the end in case anybody's wondering how this is being put together or what this is all about. It's so fun to me to explore these ideas and to take something like these ideas that I have that I want to explore in this fictional environment, and then think these people that have inspired me, like David Tong, like Victor Turner, Merlin Donald, he's kind of a new one to me. I hadn't really heard of him before, so I'm learning about him as I'm doing this project. And I take PDFs that they've written and I put them into ChatGPT and I say, what would they say about this letter based on this information there? And it's just so much fun. So anyway, it's a little explanation at the end of letter 5 here. Or no, this is letter 6. And letter 7, we're going into some Joseph Smith territory coming up. So buckle up. I am. And thanks again for listening to Infants on Thrones.
I was lost for some time when I came across this sign saying you are you where I'm from. We don't like visitors come. No trespassing, that's what it says. And you first break read. No trespassing at my ass where they don't need. Dad, stop. Yeah.